In October of 1347, 12 ships from the Black Sea docked at the Sicilian port of Messina. People gathered on the docks were met with a horrifying surprise. Most sailors aboard the ships were dead, and those who were still alive were gravely ill and covered in black boils that oozed with blood and pus. It was the arrival of Black Death, the most fatal pandemic recorded in human history. It was transmitted by a bacteria which was unknown to human at that time. This bacteria travels from person to person through the air as well as through the bite of infected fleas and rats. Both of these pests could be found almost everywhere in medieval Europe, but they were particularly found in all kinds of ships. Black Death outbreak originated in China in the early to mid of 13th century. In 1333 it destroyed 2/3 of China's population. It hit the northeastern Chinese province of Hopei where it killed to 90% of the population. About 5 million Chinese people were hit by this plague. Since China was known as one of the busiest world trading nations, it was only a matter of time before the outbreak of China spread through Western Asia and Europe. The plague arrived in Europe in October 1347, when 12 ships from the Black Sea docked at the Sicilian port of Messina. People gathered on the docks were met with a horrifying surprise. Most sailors aboard the ships were dead, and those still alive were gravely ill and covered in black boils that oozed blood and pus. Sicilian authorities hastily ordered the ship to leave out of the harbor, but it was too late. Bubonic plague already started spreading to Europe. It spread in lightning speed which never seen before. It crushed the life of everyone who come across. It symbolizes years of death. Once the bacteria enters the human body, the bacteria become localized in an inflamed lymph node, where they begin to colonize and reproduce, which cause enlarged and painful lymph nodes, known as buboes. Buboes associated with the bubonic plague are commonly found in the armpits, upper femoral, groin and neck region. Other symptoms include heavy breathing, continuous vomiting of blood, aching limbs, coughing, and extreme pain which is caused by the decay of the skin while the person is still alive. There was no proper treatment was discovered during its outbreak, but some weird methods were used to treat the plague. One form was to cut open a lump with sharp knife and cover it with a warm layer of butter, onion, and figs to draw the poison out. Another was to take a live frog and rub its belly over the victim's body. Dung and urine were also among the treatment prescribed by the doctors. Such methods didn't work, and at the time no cure was ever found. As a result, most people died within 12 hours. The doctors who were treating bubonic plague used wear creepy outfit to protect them from infection. It consisted of an ankle-length overcoat, a bird-like beak mask filled with sweet or strong-smelling substances, along with gloves and boots. The mask had glass openings for the eyes. Straps held the beak in front of the doctor's nose, which had 2 small nose holes and was a type of respirator. The beak could hold dried flowers, herbs, spices, camphor, or a vinegar sponge. The purpose of the mask was to remove bad smells, thought to be the principal cause of the disease. Doctors believed the herbs would counter the evil smells of the plague and prevent them from becoming infected. The costume included a wide-brimmed leather hat to indicate their profession. They used wooden canes to point out areas needing attention and to examine patients without touching them. The canes were also used to keep people away and to remove clothing from plague victims without having to touch them. The primary duties of a plague doctor were to treat and cure victims of the plague, and to bury the dead. Plague doctors were also responsible for tallying the number of casualties in logbooks for public record. They also documented the last wishes of their patients. Furthermore, plague doctors were often summoned to testify and witness wills of the dead and dying. At times plague doctors were even requested to conduct autopsies, in order to better understand how the plague might be treated. Regardless of all these efforts, Black Death spread entire Europe. Mortality was high, perhaps 100% in pregnant women and nursing mothers, and almost 100% in adolescents, particularly in country areas. England, for instance, the population 100 years after the plague's first visit was only 15% of what it was before. Similar effects were evident for the Justinian plague, and both had major effects on the turn of history. The Black Death is estimated to have killed 30% to 60% of Europe's population. In total, the plague may have reduced the world population from an estimated 475 million to 375 million in the 14th century. It took 200 years for Europe's population to recover to its previous level. Outbreaks of the plague recurred at various locations around the world until the early 20th century. At the time of the Black Death, many people had no understanding of why so suddenly people were becoming sick and dying. Many believed that it was God's way of punishing them for the sins that were committed. In this fragile time, priests and temples were always busy with people begging for mercy or praying for their families. The Black Death epidemic had run its course by the early 1350s, but the plague reappeared every few generations for centuries. The interesting question appear is, does plague still exists? And the answer is yes, the plague still exists. There are powerful antibiotics are available to treat the Black Death, even though according to the World Health Organization, there are still 1,000 to 3,000 cases of plague every year. And when it occurs, it is having a fatality rate of around 10%.